I'm Kier.
I'm Haley.
And I'm Jay from Gallifrey Public Radio,
a podcast member of the Gonna Geek Network.
Just like the one you're listening to right now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual.
Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And get ready, because geekiness begins in 3,
2,
1.
You are listening to the Starling Tribune, a podcast dedicated to the Arrow TV show.
This guy gets more airtime than the Kardashians, right?
This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, situations, and stories are the properties of Time Warner. I am the Oracle, and this is your Tribune.
Welcome back to the Starling Tribune. My name is Stargate Pioneer. But you know what? Just for fun, go ahead and call me SP. This week, your reporters for this special summer edition of the Starling Tribune, looking back at episode 15 from season 1 of DC's Legends of Tomorrow. It's the penultimate episode of the first season. Are Chris.
If you tell the team I actually care, I'll shave your head.
Go ahead. I need a haircut. Go ahead. Go ahead. Just do it. And Neil.
Somebody order up a rescue.
Is that like 911? Or no. The Thunderbirds. Thunderbirds go.
Nice.
And joining us this week in her new and improved role as a regular, full-fledged, contract-signed co-host is Michelle.
This is madness. I like it.
I knew I liked you for a reason. Hey guys, this podcast is recorded live on Thursday, September 8th, 2016 on geeks.live. Now, as for comic book qualifications, there seems to have been a little bit of a debate, especially since I'm actually reading current issues, but I'm not an expert. So we're going to go with Neil's description from the last episode that we are all comic book enthusiasts. Right, Chris?
Dude, you guys read more comics than I do now. I'm kind of jealous.
And Neil.
Aquaman was awesome this week. Aquaman, can you believe it?
I didn't ever think I'd say that personally or hear somebody say it and with a straight face. And Michelle.
God, I can't believe Aquaman is good. Like, it's so stunning that it's so good. We have to talk about it again just to verify the fact that Aquaman was really good this week.
I don't believe any of you. I do not.
Go ahead and pick it up on Comixology or go to your local comic book store.
But then I have to read Aquaman.
I know. It's so weird. Okay, guys. While we normally cover the CW television show Arrow, it's obviously not airing right now. So during this off season, we're talking about the CW television show DC Legends of Tomorrow. I really have to get the FX reverb fixed on my mixer, as well as news, interviews, articles, and announcements that have dropped in the past week that could impact future episodes of Arrow when it returns for season 5, as well as upcoming episodes of The Flash, Supergirl, and Legends of Tomorrow. And as we all know, Constantine, because it's definitely coming back at some point in time. We all know it is. And Vixen and all those great
Hashtag save Constantine. Just a friendly reminder for you guys, this podcast will definitely contain spoilers for episode 15 of Legends of Tomorrow. But honestly, if you haven't seen it yet, our spoiler warning shouldn't matter. Go see it, pause this, go watch it, then come back. It will also contain spoilers for the rest of the first season and all the episodes that have aired. So consider yourself warned. And if you haven't watched it yet, hit pause on this podcast, I'm telling you, and then come back.
And speaking of spoilers, as you probably guessed, sometimes we geek out and talk about this week's DC Comics. So every once in a while, there could be a comic book spoiler. But we promise we'll try our best not to ruin anything for you.
If you're new to the show, thank you for searching us out on the internet and joining us. If you like our content, why don't you swing by our podcast network home at www.gonnageek.com, where you can find all of our past shows, plus a ton of other geeky videos, podcasts, and articles, all under the Gonna Geek Productions banner.
Guys, as much as I'd like to talk about this week's DC Comics or the GonnaGeek.com podcast network, I'm ready to get into this week's episode. Neil, go ahead and break it down for us.
Thanks, SP. So this week we are talking about Season 1, Episode 15 of Legends of Tomorrow, titled Destiny. The air date was May 12th, 2016 on the CW television network and up here in Canada on CTV. The director was Olatunji Asanumi. I probably butchered that. And similar to last week, this week marks another directorial debut in the Berlantiverse, with Mr. Asanumi joining the DC TV family on this episode. He's no stranger to being behind the camera, though, or to even genre TV. While he's done nothing else in the Berlantiverse, his other director credits do include one episode of Bates Motel, 2 of Sleepy Hollow, 2 of Minority Report, 6 of Falling Skies, 1 episode of The Last Ship, and other genre titles. Now, this week's a bit unusual, and we talked about it in a preview last week, but there's no actual writing credit this week. Instead, as we run up to the finale, the showrunners really took the reins themselves, took the helm, and if you're a fan of the show or this podcast, you're no stranger to the names of the fine folks who got the creative credits this week. This week, it's story by Mark Guggenheim, teleplay by Phil Klemmer and Chris Fedak, and executive story editor Ray Unterschit. So we've talked about all these guys before. It's really the A-team as they bring it on home.
It is, and this is very similar, the writing team on this, to the pilot episode. I have a hunch what they did is they wrote the pilot, they wrote the penultimate and the last episode, and maybe the last 3 episodes, and they were like, okay, let's go get a team to take us from point A to point B, and we all saw how that happened. I just want to make a plug-in for The Last Ship. It's a popcorn show, right? But there's some good actors on it. Matter of fact, the actress that plays, what was her name? The Agent Carter, Bridget Reagan is her name. She is on The Last Ship in the 2nd season and is doing great. Now, Falling Skies, that is over with. It ended last year, but that had been a great summer show for 4 or 5 years. So that was great. So this guy definitely has some cred, in my opinion, to be running a Legends of Tomorrow show. Talking about the ratings, though, for this particular episode, last week, as Michelle talked about on the podcast, I got to listen to at least that much of it, Michelle. It was the series low at 1.62. And I was so distraught by it that I just could not be available for the podcast. Yeah, that's really why. But the rating this week is up to 1.89. And if you look at the other CW DC shows that week, Supergirl, which was on CBS, was off the air. It had completed back in April. Constantine had completed back in February. So all you had was Flash, Arrow, and Legends. Flash on the Tuesday of that week. The episode was The Runaway Dinosaur, and it got a rating of almost double of the Legends of Tomorrow rating at 3.52, which is great for a CW show. Arrow, Monument Point. Yeah, that was a great episode, right? That was akin to The Wall trying to nuke Star City, right? Except for they actually nuked a city and it was on the other side. So spoilers, but yeah, that's what happened. And in the rating for a nuclear explosion on the CW network that decimates a city, 2.16. Yep, not as good as The Flash, but better than Legends of Tomorrow, which was on Thursday that week. This is the penultimate episode, guys. We've only got one more of these to talk about before Arrow season 5 comes up. So let's talk about this one. As we've started all of our discussions, we'll talk about the title for the episode. And this episode's title was Destiny. And I have to admit, the first thing I think about is Destiny with a time travel show is Back to the Future. So that's where I think they got this title, Back to the Future.
No, it's all about the Bungie game called Destiny. They're big fans of it. They're playing it behind the scenes. This is an homage to Bungie's wonderful game that I've only played for like 15 minutes.
I think we're way off the track here, Michelle. What do you think? What do you got for us?
Well, it's what this whole show's been about. It's been trying to change time, but then time's supposed to happen. And then it's that whole, well, you have a destiny. Well, if you have a destiny, then that's set. And then they want free will. And so it's that whole sort of, do we have free will? Do we fight for that? Or do we have a destiny and are we stuck with it? There you go.
I see. Well, I don't know. I mean, there's no strings attached to me, right, guys?
No,
Nice
Ultron.
pull. You have to say in a more creepy, robotic kind of Blacklist kind of voice if you're going to say it
Again,
that way.
I can't reach the FX from here. Otherwise, I could.
That's very similar to what I'd say is the recurring theme for this episode as well. And it's fate versus free will. And I think all the characters struggle with that the entire episode, from the discovery of the Oculus wellspring onwards. It's, are we actually doing anything that makes a difference? If we just sat in our ship, would the same thing actually happen anyways? And it really, I think you see the characters struggle with the consequences of their actions and whether anything they've done the entire season or their entire mission really mattered, and how they all dealt with that realization.
So is that kind of like, I think being part of a communist nation is a really good idea, because I don't have to put any thought into anything. Somebody tells me where to go, what to do, what to wear, yada, 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 until the reality starts to sink in that, hey, one day you might want to drive to the town next door, but you can't for a variety of different reasons. One, they don't want you to go. Two, you might not have the gas available. Three, your car might be broke because the whole system to provide car parts is that. So communism might not actually be the panacea that you think it's going to be. And I think this is the whole thing about free will versus fate as well, is that, well, fate is always great until you want to do something that's not your fate, and you can't do that. So I think as human beings, we like to believe in the free will, because we can believe we can be anything. Like, I could be the president of the United States if I want to be. And this year, yeah, that might have been a reality if I really wanted to do it, given who we're up against. But anything's possible. So I think in terms of time travel, that being able to have free will is definitely a must. In my world, anyway, that's how I choose to believe the universe.
So when the reveal happened with the Oculus and them being able to manipulate, and they said they were controlling everything, how did you guys feel about that?
It's just a MacGuffin.
There's always thought about somebody behind the scenes actually controlling everything, that somebody has this grand strategic plan, that we've got this viewpoint going forward that we're going to be able to do with what we want to do. And as a matter of fact, that was actually talked about in one of the comic books this week. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it was a Marvel comic book. Anyway, the point the point being is that there's these grand organizations, whether it's Argus or whatever, and they have this vision on where they want to be in the future, and they go through decades and decades and decades to get there. And the Chinese have this 100-year plan. That's not comic book. That's real life. They have a 100-year plan. And, different people have different plans. Now, do they turn out? Well, things change. Things change in 5 years. So you have to roll with the punches. Think about when we grew up. There was stuff that didn't exist back then that exists now, that changes how we like this did not exist when we were growing up.
I'll pull it back to the Oculus.
Okay.
Michelle, your question was, how did we feel? And not to take away from any of that, it's the realization that your plans may not work out. As SB clearly said, it may not even be your plans that you're part of. I felt like suddenly a lot more of the season made sense, because things turned out so poorly, and it should be a relatively competent team. I'm like, yeah, I actually get that. I get that somebody was behind the scenes kind of throwing a wrench in the plans, and yeah, I get it. So I didn't feel that badly about the reveal. How about you, Michelle? Nope.
Chris?
So for me, it's kind of a Wizard of Oz moment here because the Time Masters are supposed to be these great scholars of time. They've researched, they see how potential actions can have implications that reshape everything, and it's through tests, analysis, and things like that you expect it to happen. And then all of a sudden it's, no, we have a magic machine that allows us to look at everything and predict how it happens. I was like, oh, well, this is a little less cool. You're not as special as I thought you were. In fact, I would say the time ship captains are probably more special because they don't have this magic machine. It's, here's what I've learned about how time works. I have to try and manipulate to do what is right or keep things working. Whereas the Time Master's like, let me use the machine, and then I'll manipulate from what it tells me. So I felt like it kind of took away some of their supposed greatness in my eyes. Maybe I read way too much into it, though.
Yeah, deepness in this show. I think maybe we scrape it once in a while, but I don't think it was made to be that deep. At least not this season. That's what I'm saying. At least. And by the way, the comic book that I was talking about was Aquaman.
Who?
And the B story that's going on.
There's a B story in Aquaman.
Yeah,
that means there's an A story, right? How the hell does Aquaman get an A story?
And a B story. You're talking about the Black Manta story.
I mean, I just figured he wouldn't even rate high enough to get an A story.
Well, when you have freaking Superman, which is on the cover, so I'm not giving away anything, that's kind of an A story right there.
Sure it is. For Aquaman.
Okay, before we move on to the fights, does anybody have anything to talk about time travel, fate, and destiny and that sort of thing? Okay, no.
Not yet.
I'm trying to save Chris from having his noodle baked right now.
Send your hate mail about my Aquaman comments to js@gonnageek.com. He is the official repository for all hate mail. He will then relay it on to us. He enjoys getting it. So when I make fun of Aquaman and you're offended, go to js@gonnageek.com. Thank you.
However, if you are an Arrow fan and you want to bring a Laurel back and retcon her death, for that, go ahead and email chris@gonnageek.com.
I hate you so much right now.
You might as well say it. Go say your hashtag.
Hashtag no Laurel, great Arrow.
They came up with a save.
That's honestly why I thought you had a soundboard at. So you're tired of even saying it. You just have it on a soundboard.
I will put it on a soundboard in the future for you guys. You can just point at me and I'll go and just hit the button and duck my head in shame as my own voice comes out with the thing that I never meant to say yet again.
All right, Chris. So let's move on to the fights before you get too down in the dumps.
I'm so sad.
So, right. We had the spaceship firing on Vanishing Point, which is always cool to see these space battles going on. Saw some amazing stuff in Dark Matter earlier this summer. This was akin to that. You know, it's all space CGI, you know, with the black background. You know, you don't have anything of note back there. You just have the spaceship, the space station firing back and forth. So that was pretty cool. So what else do you got in the name of fights, Chris?
Let's see. Next, we've got Jefferson returning in the jump ship and just mowing down all sorts of Time Master soldiers right outside the Oculus. And I don't know about you guys. When that happened, I did a little fist pump like Data does in the end of Generations. I'm like, yes!
Did you see the Legends team on the ground, though? They're all like down on one knee going, oh, please don't hit me. Please don't hit me.
Oh, no, what is going on?
It was pretty cool to see. And of course, it's all CGI, so it's not really happening. There's no practical effects there.
Yeah.
And then there was the final battle, the battle of which we lost Captain Cold.
The ultimate showdown of Ultimate Destiny.
Right.
There are no strings on him. Exactly. Yeah.
Lots of firing, the gun, the heat gun, the cold gun. We even got Firestorm back together again. They weren't dying anymore. And it was a big event. And there was other stuff that happened at the end there, which I'm sure we'll talk about later in the episode. I'm not going to take that away from somebody else.
All I'm going to say is Captain Cold proved he's one hell of a thief.
He did.
Oh, I has a sad.
Yes.
So now that we're all sad, let's talk a little bit about the time travel in this episode.
You know what? I think the first bit, and it's not really time travel, but it was a flashback to, well, I guess it was time travel. It was a flashback to the start where we saw the recruiting scene back in 2016. And to see the team back together before all the messing with the timeline and all the crap where they were just, Canary and Firestorm and the Hawks and the bad guys just hanging on the roof, not really believing Captain Hunter. It was a nice throwback. It was I really enjoyed that part.
It was amazing. I think it might have worked maybe a little bit better if it was in the next episode versus this episode, but because you had to get Jax back, you had to have it at this point in time. Once again, I think the writing room might have not have been as robust as it should have been. Or yes, Chris?
I almost think this episode was supposed to air like 2 hours in one block the way it's set up. And if you look at it that way as like a 2-hour episode, I think that intro works very well for the whole arc you get across this episode and the finale. I think that might have been the plan, and they ended up splitting it because, man, it would have worked.
It would have. And Jax comes back. He goes, Marty, you got to come back. It's your kids. You got to come back to the future. Right.
I thought you said Morty for a second. I was going to go on a Rick and Morty rant.
It was so Bill and Ted for me, though, because like Jax forgives Stein for roofing him. So now it's, does Stein roofie Jax because that was his original plan, or does he roofie Jax because Jax said so? And then it's kind of like that whole Bill and Ted's, like, you got to make sure you put the keys where they are, and you got to do the trash can, and you got to make the recording, or otherwise the stuff won't happen. And it's just like, what? Huh?
Dude, totally don't forget to roofie me. Excellent.
He created a temporal paradox by doing that. If he doesn't do it, does it still happen? And I just had Star Trek flashbacks to some of the time travel episodes where I'm like, oh, my brain hurts. Oh,
On the
God.
day that we are recording this, it is the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. Happy anniversary.
Happy birthday,
to
Star Trek.
Happy birthday, Star Trek.
Happy birthday.
And so now that we're talking about Star Trek, let's talk about our wonderful captain, just like Captain Picard on Star Trek, right? So he has kind of an eventful episode.
Yes.
He gets mad.
And then sad.
And then bad.
And then doesn't have a plan.
That's Captain Kirkian of him.
It was.
And he calls his crew, you lot guard the entrance. I'm like, what? That's how you refer to your crew, your team? You lot. You ragamuffins.
It's a British thing.
So I was trying to figure on the scale to rate him, and I was like, well, everything's going to heck in a handbasket. That's very Captain Kirk-ish. But Captain Kirk has his team, which has thought through all these strategic things in advance so that when stuff does go bad, they can rely on each other to go forward. And in this particular case, that is not the case. So I cannot call Captain Hunter Captain Kirk in this particular episode because of that.
Yeah, he pouts again. At first, like when I learned about the magic machine, it was like, well, maybe he was all pouty because of the magic machine. But now they're in the area where the magic machine doesn't work. So he's pouty because of that's who he is. He's just pouty again.
I think the
And
revelation...
everybody else...
The revelation of that machine kind of broke him a little bit, though, too. That they've been pulling his strings this whole time. That this body he lived to protect and to work with and to try and shape time. No, they were screwing with him the whole time. And he's really had no control of everything when he thought he was doing things because he wanted to. He felt controlled, and it kind of broke him for a little bit. Maybe I'm giving Rip Hunter too much credit, but...
No, you know what? He gave up again, if you'll notice, and it was Ray that had to re-inspire him. Ray has served that re-inspiring role. But yeah, Captain Rip Hunter gave up yet again.
Okay, so he gave up. He threw in the towel. He waved the white flag. And so we've been rating the captain throughout this entire series. it's too late to break up the string. Let's go ahead and do it. And Neil, do you want to introduce this little segment that we've come to know and love?
Well, every week we rate our dear Captain Rip Hunter on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being awesome, like Picard. 1 being, and I've usually gone with Captain Crunch, but this week I'm changing it up. I'm going with Captain Edward John Smith, captain of the Titanic, that saw what was coming and just kept going right into it. That's a 1. Picard is a 10.
Maybe that's a hint of where Neil's going with this for his rating.
You know what he did, and maybe I will start it off. So I made a big point about the fact that he gave up, he crumbled, yelled, "No one controls me," the one pouted in his cage. But once he was remotivated, aside from using inappropriate language to talk to his crew, he did kind of put something together. He used his resources. I'm giving him a 3 this week.
Michelle, what do you think?
Yeah, he did give up. He did come back. I'll give him the whole your family was killed by the people you work for. So I do agree with Neil's 3. I would like to give Ray 5 and Sarah an 8. Just because I can.
Okay.
I think they deserve it though. They deserve it. But anyway.
So my main thing is that at the end, they're going to blow the thing up, and there's no tactical formation at all. They're just waltzing down the middle of the street, and they get caught with their pants down, and Jax has to come in just happenstance and save them. So I'm going to take him down from a 3 to a 1.5.
Wasn't happenstance, it was destiny, SP.
I see. So you're going to obviously give him an 8 because he knew that was going to happen,
I
right?
was not going to give him an 8, but I was going to give him about a 5. I mean, his world got shattered. Everything he knew that he has devoted his life to, I think he's excused a little bit of losing it. And then he kind of works with his team, and they come up with a method to go forward. And he kind of, granted, he calls them you lot, but he uses them appropriately. He acknowledges the sacrifice that people are going to make. He doesn't give this long speech of don't do it. It's okay. You got to do it.
Now, quick question. Did he also execute all his friends because all the time ships and the other captains who weren't in on this, were they still trapped with their AIs singing show tunes in the hangars?
So I was thinking about that. I mean, they're pretty resourceful people, and I'll take it that they're probably better at captaining than he is. So they're probably getting into their AIs and rebooting their systems, and they have some sort of functionality, realize what's going on, and have limped their ships out of the thing. So I think at least 3 of them, the 3 that we saw out of the, 15 or so of the ships in the hangar, I think 3 of them got out at least.
Now, wait a minute. He's the captain and the leader. He doesn't even offer to go down with the ship. He's like, okay, Ray. Oh, now it's you, Mick. Okay, now it's you, Snart. Oh, okay. Let me put Ray in my pocket and run.
His mission's not done until he stops Savage, though. That's what this has all been built towards, is Rip Hunter needs to stop Vandal Savage. That is his one goal for all of this that's being done. He's not going to put that aside. Perhaps it's selfish, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but he's made no bones about it since day one. We are stopping Savage.
Did you just say maybe it's selfish?
Yeah, it is.
It's definitely selfish, but this has been a selfish mission for him the entire time. It's, well, you need to save the world, but mainly you need to save my family, because I've tried, as we found out last episode, 100 different times in 100 different ways, and it still happens.
Well, this is building up towards his gradual acceptance that it does have to happen. I think you finally get that at the end of this episode when he asks Gideon to pull all the news stories and things like that, and Gideon basically says, it probably still happened. This is him building up towards, okay, I can't change this. I have to accept it and move on.
See, he looked into the Oculus Rift and he knew that Captain Cold was going to die and that Heatwave was going to want to avenge Captain Cold. So this whole thing was to get Heatwave to kill Vandal Savage eventually, because nobody else apparently can do that.
Seriously, SP, he looked into the Oculus Rift and he saw the future in 3D.
And he saw Mark
VR.
Zuckerberg.
Why not?
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
So, okay, enough talking about Captain Hunter, because whatever. Let's talk about his nemesis. Let's talk about Vandal. He was hopping all over the place. This is the episode that he actually killed Hunter's family.
Again. Because didn't we get it early on? They showed it in one of the original flashbacks or something.
Yeah, the first episode, right?
But this is
Yeah.
current Vandal Savage time. This is when he did it. He left the vanishing point with Kendra and Carter and Stasis.
I'm going to
Thank
get
God
a
we didn't
time
see
travel
him.
headache, aren't I?
Oh,
Yeah.
no. It happened as we first saw it. And this just goes to prove no matter what our guys have done, it will still unfold exactly the way that it was supposed to unfold.
Killed the kid. Now, did he kill the kid with a ray gun or a normal gun? I
thought it
wasn't
was just
sure
a
about
gun.
It looked like it had like a red beam coming out of it.
That's the laser targeting system.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And again, my favorite point is when he looked over at Kendra and said, "I have an appointment I have with Destiny." It's like, kind of sounds like an exotic dancer. You kind of want to frame that differently.
Why not? I mean, there's an exotic dancer for Vandal. There's an exotic dancer for everybody. I mean, you just have to go to the right club.
Fair enough.
You know, there's something. When did he become Vandal Savage? Like, because he calls Kendra Shiar and stuff, and then he calls Carter whatever the Egyptian Carter thing is.
Prince
But then they
Khufu.
keep calling, Then they call them Kendra and Carter, and he's Vandal Savage. But that wasn't his Egyptian name. When
In the
Like,
Arrow
when this-
Flash crossover.
And he even calls Rip by his Egyptian name as well every time he sees him. His prisoner name.
Yeah.
You get stuck in your ways. You know, you're 4,000 years old, and yeah, you just whatever you learn first, that's what you go with, right?
Okay, I just wonder when Vandal Savage decided I'm going to call myself Vandal, and the last name was Savage because
Probably
it's cool.
When they started
exactly.
making records so that he could actually write a different name down. Just thinking.
Okay.
You get bored. It's a millennia. You come up with a cool name.
Okay. Either way, he was destined to be called Vandal Savage and destined to kill Rip's family.
And
Because of
destined
the
to
Time
meet that
Masters.
stripper.
Speaking of the Time
Masters.
Masters, exactly. Any thoughts on a bunch which turned out to be super a-holes?
Yeah, they suck.
They wanted to make themselves again. It's true. They wanted to keep everything static to make themselves and then to beat the aliens.
Should we talk about that
Thanagarians.
reveal?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the alien reveal here.
Thanagarians. I mean, we know that now. This is the cool thing. So in the DC universe, and we'll talk about this later, the Hawks have had different backgrounds, but one of the more common themes is the alien Hawk race, the Thanagarians. So it turns out the Time Masters have been doing this entire thing because Vandal is the only one that can protect the Earth against the Thanagarian invasion. So yeah, we get aliens. Sweet.
Yeah, that's cool.
Nice.
I wonder if we'll get them in the Justice League or Justice Society next season 2, right?
You might get reference to them, but they haven't said anything about them yet, and you would think they would, because there's a lot of people, especially myself, like if you grew up watching the Justice League cartoon, the word Thanagarian's a big deal, because Shiara, as in Hawk Girl, was a Thanagarian, and the whole first arc of uniting the Justice League in that cartoon is all about the Thanagarian invasion.
Mm-hmm.
Great arc. Go watch it on Netflix, people.
So they want to create a human force that will be able to repel the Thanagarians. And in order to do that, Vandal Savage has to unify the planet, which I find the stomach, but okay. I mean, we've got superheroes now. We've got metahumans now. They can save us.
That's my point. That was exactly my point as being my exact thought. It's like, how uncreative. It's like, didn't they like know about the Flash? I mean, and all of them. It's like just Vandal Savage.
I guess. I don't know. In their time, anyway. So the Time Masters also try to convert Heatwave back to Kronos, and we see how that works out for them. Not very well.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. Not well at all.
Yeah, and that was satisfying. Let's face it. Having Mick stop that transformation and execute on his promise in the torture chair, and take out the Time Master who was torturing him and reprogramming him. Very satisfying. Scale of 1 to 10, 10.
Mm-hmm. And he's got more satisfying things to do. Plus, he's got all the cool armor now. That was left back on the ship, right? So he's got it.
But he doesn't like it.
That's right. And then also, we find out that the Time Masters do indeed have a fleet of time ships, which all kind of look like a cross between the Millennium Falcon and an A-Wing fighter on Star Wars, which cool on you, CGI team. Really like that. And we see them all taking off, and I love that Battlestar Galactica hangar scene. No, it's all CGI. There's no real thing to it, but it was awesome to see. Reminded me of the Rebel fleet trying to take off, about to attack the Death Star, or Mass Effect Pelicans, or Halo Pelicans, excuse me, getting down for a combat drop, or aliens with Ripley about to assault the Alien Queen. It was awesome seeing that. I think we need more of that in the Sci-Fi Channel, CW2. So I don't know if we're going to get it or not. I think this was our one shot to go to space with CW TV.
For now.
Hey, it wouldn't be an episode of Legends of Tomorrow if we didn't get some awesome Sarah Lance White Canary action. Again, with Punch Gideon, she proves that she is a badass pilot. And then that one line that broke my heart: "Want to steal a kiss from me? You better be one hell of a thief." Knowing where this is going, I was just like, oh, don't do this to us. Oh, it's going to suck.
And it did, but it was glorious at the same time. It was awesome seeing those two hook up for a kiss, just out of, I don't know, mutual admiration, heartfelt admiration or something like that. I doubt there's any romantic attraction between the two, but I'm sure shippers can find all sorts of things that they can gain from that.
Oh, there was serious flirting going on there.
Yeah, they've been flirting for half the season.
Yeah.
I've been so distracted with Ray and baristas and whatever. I guess I missed it.
Oh, God.
Someone had to go there.
I'm so glad that storyline's over.
Well, do a lot in this episode, did she? She kind of loses it when she realizes Savage is going to kill Rip's family. And then Savage kills Rip's family. And that was basically it. And I will say it, there was absolutely no reference to being a barista. Hashtag no barista, no legends.
It was part of the subtext. You just had to really read into it a lot.
Hashtag no barista, great legends.
Well done, sir.
Well, yeah, because she's not in season 2.
That's right.
Look how I spun that.
And no Carter.
Yeah.
No Carter.
The Hawks are like my least favorite characters, so I am not sad to see them not be in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
There was quite a bit of Ray Palmer on this one, though, and we definitely saw that he still cared for Kendra. He totally freaked out when she was shot by the prison guards. And as we talked about earlier, he's the one that kind of pulled the team back together when everybody had given up. And that's a role that he's taken on quite a bit this season. So I think good arc, good character development for Ray Palmer.
Ray Palmer is the heart of this crew. He's what keeps everyone together. He's the one that motivates them and gets everyone back on the same page. He's the heart of the crew.
A little bit too much of a heart. I mean, it gets a little bit excessive at sometimes, but yeah, I would agree that he is the heart. And he was facing, once again, his mortality in this episode because he was told that he was going to die. And so what does one do when they figure out they're going to go die? they go eat a pink cupcake.
See, that's what you do, Rip. You face it, you eat a cupcake, and then you motivate everybody else to get the job done. That's how you face death, with a cupcake.
Speaking of facing death, I mean, the first guy to put his hand in the Oculus Rift, yes, we'll call it that now, time machine self-destruct mechanism was Mick Rory. He's like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I told me I got to hold down this lever thing. And his lines this episode were awesome. You know, I focused on how much I hated all of you. Oh yeah, that's good. Break my arms.
So they well, let's go back to that self-destruct thing where they have to push the thing down in order to keep the self-destruct. You mean to tell me they couldn't have wedged something in there, a gun, a piece of armor off the Atom suit, just
Duct
something?
tape.
Yeah, they couldn't have done that?
No, because plot.
Guess not.
I mean,
Well-
I thought the same thing, but
I mean, you got to push a lever to get Gideon to go.
look,
So-
SP, that's the twist for next season. They're going to jump back in time, like seconds before Captain Cold die, and hand him a roll of duct tape, and then take him back on the Wave Rider if they tape it down, and he disappears and still appears to be dead.
So
There's your
would it be
loophole.
would it be normal duct tape, or would it be the special red duct tape that was on Battlestar Galactica?
With the corners cut off, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
I think he's just going to take his heat gun and go, wait a second, jam it in there and wedge it in there and then run away.
Well, no, he'd lose his gun then. He loves that gun.
He can get another one. Cisco's made him one already. He's just going to have to go and assault Cisco.
Yeah, because he threw the cold gun down on the body, so both guns are there. Didn't they take both guns back to the ship?
Yes, Mick has
Yeah.
both weapons at this point in time.
It's all good. And then add a Cisco in, and you're all good. You know what? Cisco needs to Cisco up the Wave Rider. I think that would be cool.
That would be cool.
But could he? Because the technology is very advanced over what Cisco deals with.
Oh, come on.
You know what?
If-
Jax should show him what to do because he knows the internal schematics now. He's like, yeah, this part's always breaking and this part's always breaking, and oh, yeah, this requires manual manipulation.
How
Just
did you-
little tweaks?
How did you figure this all out? Because my captain's a wanker and doesn't know how to fix his own ship.
And I'm an auto mechanic, and auto mechanics know all.
What's the difference between a time ship and a 57 Chevy? Nothing. It's all
Just
the
a few
same.
decades of technology. It's no biggie.
No biggie at all.
You know, we talked a lot when we were talking about time travel, about Jackson and Professor Stein interacting and how going back and kind of convincing himself. And the speeches that we had there were really good. But I liked it more and got kind of more pumped when Gideon called the team on the old-fashioned phone sitting in Hunter's
That's cool.
office. That was very cool.
So I'm going to do, normally a little bit later, we do callbacks to pop culture and stuff like that. I'm going to do one right here. There's many things that could be akin to. I'm going to point directly to the TARDIS because the TARDIS has a real phone that rings all the time, and Doctor has to answer it, or one of the companions have to answer. This was the same thing. So I'm calling this as a Doctor Who pop culture reference.
Good call.
Yep.
I
I'll
can
take
live with
that.
it.
Love the fact that Gideon hit herself in the latency core, though. That was pretty cool. Yeah, I got these buggers outsmarted. Nope, they don't think to dump the temporary memory. I'm all good.
That's awesome. Guys, I think we've just about covered everybody and all the main characters. Do we miss anything?
Rest in peace, Captain Cold.
Yes. R.I.P. Captain Cold. This is obviously the last time we'll see Captain Cold in this season. We will not see him in the final episode. So at least real time. So that was sad to me because he's amazing on screen, and to lose him was losing a big part of the show, but it was a big ensemble cast. So I didn't think the entire cast was going to stay together forever. It's just not going to happen.
I'm going to miss him.
Yeah. Well, he does
He'll
have
be
that-
back.
Yeah, he has that contract for all DC shows, so he could show up in any of them.
But you're not going to get that version of Snart. All that character development you got as he starts to become Citizen Cold, almost like you see in the comics, goes away because he never went, or the Snart that we then meet again is not the one that went to the Back to the Future. Wow, I couldn't speak.
Well, no, because they go back to him, they wedge something in there, and second before he
that's
explodes.
Honestly what I think we're going to see happen at some point in time is they're going to cheat death like that.
I could see it.
That makes sense.
They did it in Doctor Who with Clara. They took her out of the time stream. Of course, that's different. She's not alive, but spoilers, I guess, for Doctor Who. Go find that. All right, so let's dig me out of this hole. Neil, what do we got going on next week?
Well, next week we have the Legends of Tomorrow Season 1 finale titled Legendary. Original air date was Thursday, May 19th, 2016. And the summary is that after numerous sacrifices the team has made since the beginning of this ride, Rip decides that it's time they each decide their own destiny and returns them to Central City a few months after they first left. Return to their normal lives, each team member must individually decide if they're willing to sacrifice everything in order to save the world. Meanwhile, Sarah visits with her father, who delivers some heartbreaking news about her sifter edit point sister.
That's staying in.
Thanks.
So that's an important part because Vandal Savage brings it up before that. Have you talked to your sister lately? And that was a couple episodes ago. So we're going to see that come to roost here. And we've known this for quite some while. I mean, Chris is so distraught. He won't watch Arrow again until Laura's brought back.
I'm so sad.
So it will be something to watch. All right, so let's make Chris happy again. Let's talk about the DC Easter eggs and pop culture references in this penultimate edition of Legends of Tomorrow. So Neil, what do we got for our first one?
Well, we talked about the first one. It was the reference that the Time Masters made to Thanagar and the Thanagarians. So DC's alien Hawkman species, home to Nth Metal, strong ties to Hawkgirl and Hawkman. This just became canon for the DC TV universe on the CW, folks. There are lots of comic references to the lore, and as Chris pointed out, some of the best and most accessible canon is part of the Justice League Unlimited animated series. So go fire up Netflix and check that out. It's a really good intro to the entire Thanagarian race and where they exist within the DC universe.
And it is the best easy intro to the Justice League you will find anywhere, let alone any of the comics or the New 52 book that establishes them, the 2-part Thanagarian invasion or whatever, the best.
Sweet. So since you're on a roll, Chris, why don't we talk about the second pop culture
I like this. Snart and Sarah, they hide in a smuggler's hatch, which is very reminiscent of what you saw in episode 4 when the whole crew hides in smuggler hatches on the Death Star. And then again in episode 7 as Rey, Finn, and BB-8 hide in the Falcon smuggler hatches and Han Solo and Chewbacca find them.
Yeah, that was so obvious. And it was an obvious pop culture reference to all of us because we've lived and breathed and just eaten up Star Wars our entire lives. So that was pretty easy. So Michelle, what do we got for our third one?
Time Sphere. When Jax heads back to 2016, we get a look at he and Martin working on the Time Sphere that was broken in the season finale of The Flash last year. In the comics, the Time Sphere, also sometimes called a time bubble, was the primary means of time travel used by Rip Hunter, Time Master, as well as Booster Gold, the Legion of Superheroes, and other characters.
Sweet. So I'll take this next one. I'll shave your head. I read this and I was very interested in it. And it said the threat that Mick uses against Rey, and I forgot all about this until I read this, that he'll shave his head, is presumably a nod to the fact that all season long he's referred to Rey as Haircut. So that was meant to be a affectionate nod back and forth between the two characters.
I'll take the next one. It was one that we also hinted at as we were talking earlier during the episode. Captain Cold, before setting off the big, explosion that destroys the Oculus, used the iconic line, "There's no strings on me," which, some of you may have gone, "Oh, it's a Pinocchio reference." But some of us went, oh, that's an Ultron reference, which is very cool. And much like the authors of the comicbook.com article, I think that Snart owned that line.
Yeah, we most certainly did.
Yeah, much better than Ultron.
So, Chris, why don't you take the next one, please?
So the last one we have mentioned is Tabula Rasa, which is basically a blank slate, like Ray explains. It's got 2 tie-ins in a DC Comics. There was a major arc where Batman teams up with Bane, entitled Tabula Rasa, and the other was there's an organization in the Wildstorm universe whose actual name is that same thing. And if you want to go and tie it further on to another thing that geeks love, there's an episode of Buffy entitled Tabula Rasa, where everyone's memories are wiped and they start from scratch trying to figure out who they are.
That explanation was amazing between Ray and Mick. It was one of my favorite scenes from the episode as well. And the last one we just added to the list, which will be in the show notes, is my call on the Doctor Who telephone reference. We got a lot of news. We're gonna lightning speed. We're gonna flash through these as fast as we can.
Pun intended.
Yeah, there you go. But we're not going to start with Flash. We're going to start with Arrow. So, Michelle, what do we got from Stephen Amell?
Oh, Stephen finally asked to compete on Ninja Warrior. At the Salt Lake City Con, he and had a panel, and it's a great panel. And one of the people asked about Ninja Warrior, if he would do it. And he's like, okay, finally, I will do it. And so, okay, it happened. The people of Salt Lake City and the great state of Utah pushed me over the edge. ML posted today on its official Facebook page, NBC American Ninja Warrior. In 2017, I would like to compete on your show. The American Ninja Warrior co-host Matt Eisman tweeted back and said that he's in. So hopefully that'll happen.
He said he's in as long as they'll let them use the Arrow Cave for the city finals.
And did you notice what it was? Arrow Cave. We've had this discussion going on for 4 years. Arrow Cave, officially from the American Ninja Warrior.
This is awesome news, though, because if you remember, what was it, 2 summers ago when Stephen Amell was posting all of his superhero workouts on YouTube, which is A, great motivation, and B, really cool, you look at that and go, this is very Ninja Warrior-esque. They really need to get him in there, even if it's just for some awesome cross-promotion, because you know they would talk the hell out of Stephen Amell being on there. Like, oh, Stephen Amell, the Arrow himself is on here. And there was something I'd read, I don't know if it was on this news article, but another one, that I guess the Ninja Warrior people had reached out to Stephen Amell's manager before to see if he was interested in competing about the same time he put out his superhero workouts, and he had said no at that point because he didn't have time to set aside to practice properly to do Ninja Warrior.
It is grueling,
Yes.
absolutely. Like workouts that Katie Cassidy has been posting, because she was doing a lot of workouts too, still does, by the way. And she does amazing stuff as well. I don't think that the stuff that she does could translate to American Ninja Warrior. I could be wrong on that, but I just think that it's a specific style of workout that you need to do. And I think Stephen Amell is capable of doing it, but he needs to actually properly prepare. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself hurt, which would be bad for everyone.
Yeah, I'm no Ninja Warrior expert, but Stephen Amell most certainly has the upper body strength to probably do a lot of those upper body, not stunts isn't the right word, but I'm going to call it a stunt. The thing that I would think would be the most troublesome, because his workouts don't focus on it as much, is some of the balance and the jumping ones, where like you have to do a trampoline and jump up onto a rope in the right way and then climb that properly. It could be very interesting. I could see him easily making it to a city final.
Totally.
Well, let's put it this way. It's one thing to bench 300 pounds. It's another to get on the football field and actually adroitly be a lineman in the NFL. Two very separate skills. You have to have the weight behind it, but you also need to be able to move correctly and not hurt yourself in the end. So let's move on. Neil, what do we got as well for Stephen
The next
Amell?
one is on part of the same panel at Dragon Con. Stephen Amell talked about whether or not Deathstroke is actually gone. And he, to paraphrase, he said this is something that comes up a lot, but that's not how it works. And of course, this is in response to the Deathstroke footage that dropped. Was it last week? that came out from Ben Affleck. And today we actually saw who they've got to play that, but that's a different podcast. Anyways, Stephen Amell went on to say that's not how it works, that Jeff Johns and Diane Nelson, the people at Warner Brothers and the people who work for them, they're in the business of making the best products for fans. And just because there may or may not be a Deathstroke in the DC Extended Universe doesn't mean that Manu Bennett can't exist on their show.
I think this is a lot of lip service. I think finally they've gotten some talking points out there because DC and Warner Brothers have been crucified over this divide between TV and movies. So I think that if they start approaching it with these talking points, I think the general public will start to calm down a little bit, but I think it's still there. I honestly, I believe the timing was just too coincidental on too many things for it not to have been true. That's just my opinion.
Well, and Stephen Amell, speaking of his talking points, went on to say that, there was a lot of questions on whether or not they're going to recast a different Green Arrow onto the big screen. And on that same panel, he said, listen, I don't have a right to Oliver Queen. Someone played it before me. Somebody voiced it before me. Somebody will play it after me. I don't believe there are any plans for Oliver Queen in the DC Extended Universe, speaking of the movies, based off of the things that people have told him, but he wouldn't be upset if that changed. So he's being really pragmatic about it.
And Justin Hartley had said something similar, who was Oliver Queen on Smallville when the Arrow show was announced, is that, look, there can be other Oliver Queens out there and things like that. So it's the smart view for these guys to be taking. And side note, we need to get Justin Hartley to guest star on Arrow just so you have two Arrows on screen.
That'd be awesome. So guys, I got a little exercise to bring this point home. Neil, favorite Superman?
Christopher Reeve.
Chris?
Tim Daly.
Michelle?
Christopher Reeve.
Favorite Batman, Neil?
You're gonna hate me. Val Kilmer.
Chris?
Kevin Conroy.
Michelle?
Adam West.
Mine's Michael Keaton, and my favorite Superman is Christopher Reeve. Just an example, many characters have played those iconic characters on numerous different screens, numerous different venues, whatever. Stephen Amell has the right idea here, in my opinion. So, Chris, what do we have next?
Up next, since we've been talking about all the potential DC tie-ins to things, well, Greg Berlanti did an interview where he talked about how CW's Suicide Squad was actually an intentional ask by DC so they could test the concept on the small screen. He was asked a question, does Jeff Johns come to you and say, hey, here's something we tried out in a comic, let's try it here? Greg Berlanti said sometimes, or he has other executives mention it to us. They said to us a year and a half before they started developing Suicide Squad, will you guys put a version of Suicide Squad in your show because we want to have it as a film at some point? Okay, so do we believe it?
I'll go back to my comments before. And no, I think it's
a nice talking point.
Yeah, talking point.
Because they totally, for lack of a better term, just destroyed what Arrow had done with Task Force X to do the movie.
I agree, and we've talked a lot about it. I think the big news here is that they're getting some strong talking points out, and they're saying the same things. I think we'll hear it over and over and over until somebody finally breaks eventually, or it's not news anymore. So there you go. Michelle, we have some interesting news from Wendy Miracle again.
Yes, she reiterates that there's no return to Olicity. Yes. Death to Olicity. She says Oliver and Felicity are both in crisis mode. Oliver's got two really big jobs, and Felicity is spinning out about Haven Rock until they've gotten some clarity for themselves. There's not much room for the relationship side of things. So they're all, Ollie's being a mayor. She's all guilt-ridden for, one of those bombs dropping, even though it wasn't her fault that they all got launched to begin with. So I guess it's like Ollie's like rubbed off on her. Like she feels like it's her fault, even though, anyway, there's just no more Olicity. I hope that remains the case.
I think we're going to have this hammered home at least one more time before the season starts. No more Olicity, no more Olicity. So this is like the third or fourth time that we've heard this. Wendy Miracle has a talking point. She's going to make sure it gets out. And honestly, they've had a little confusing messages, so maybe they did need to come back and reiterate this because it did seem like there was a chance that their steaminess of the relationship might come back from time to time. Maybe there would be a little tension between the two, but no, everything's moved on, and there will be no more Olicity. Wendy has confirmed that. So, Chris, I think you are definitely the right person to take this next news story.
I guess you're right. So, guys, Katie Cassidy's going to be back on Arrow sooner than we thought. Which means Laurel's back sooner than we thought.
Yay!
Oh, we just love making you do the Laurel news, Chris.
So going back on topic of what's actually happening, Katie Cassidy at the Salt Lake Comic Con this weekend had said she is going to return as Laurel during the season 5 premiere of Arrow this October. She took the stage and revealed that she would appear as Laurel Lance during the very first episode of the new season, but she did not give any further details. Most people have theorized that we're going to finally hear what the dying Laurel said to Oliver while she lay dying in her hospital bed in Star City. And what she said was, #no Laurel, no Arrow.
Nice.
Sure.
Awesome. But it'll be nice to actually see or hear what went on there. We've been speculating for a while. I know people have been on and off on if they care or not, but I think it's really going to be impactful to Oliver as he goes forward. So that will be important. All right, so we're going to move on into the general DC TV news. And first and foremost, we got to talk about our Legends of Tomorrow that we've been discussing. And it does appear that we're going back to Star City 2046.
Well, kind of. So if you've been looking at the news feeds this week, a lot of the season 2 stills have dropped for Legends of Tomorrow. And in it, we actually get Steve Nimell poking around what looks to be a time ship. So we're getting some familiar faces. Also in those stills, we saw that he's fighting or wrestling with Heatwave. We also get a bit of a team up with the actor Nick Zano's Dr. Nate Haywood character. And in the same stills, it looks like we get maybe a 50s Damien Dark. He's wearing a big hat and a trench coat. So very cool.
Interesting.
Definitely. So, Chris, what do we got going over on Flash?
Next up, Entertainment Weekly did an interview with Andrew Kreisberg, one of the showrunners on Flash, who hinted that Barry might just break bad a little bit in season 3 or open the door for that possibility. He said one of the themes is, what does it mean to have power? What do you do with that power? And is power ultimately corrupting? This was all in regards to people asking, well, does Barry still have his powers in Flashpoint? They seem to indicate, yes, he does, and it might have a corrupting influence. So I'd be interested to see what that does to Barry. I don't see him breaking bad, really. I mean, he technically did when he reset everything, I guess, but
I could see it happening for fansayers for a few episodes, or at least one episode.
See, that's tough, though, because, you know, one of the best books that I read in the 90s was the Return of Barry Allen arc they did, where it seemed like Barry Allen was alive, and all of a sudden he comes back and disrupts Wally's life completely, and then kind of turns evil. And the reveal is it's not actually Barry, but they have you believing it. It's just Barry is not a character you can see as a bad guy. That's what made this story so compelling and so shocking, is the fact that, how is this possible? I don't think you can do it, especially with Grant Gustin's Barry, because he's so likable.
Right. There's just certain actors out there that play good guys, and then you... Like Will Wheaton, for example. I mean, he grew up playing Wesley Crusher on Star Trek. This 50th anniversary of Star Trek. Let's talk about Star Trek. And everything that he's come back and played at as an adult is kind of a douche. Take a look at The Guild. Take a look at Big Bang Theory. Take a look at Dark Matter. I don't know if you guys have seen that or not, but he does play a very, very wealthy, douchey character on Dark Matter. Yeah. Does it well.
Leverage as well. He played a douchey hacker.
So you take a look at little Wesley Crusher and you're like, oh, that guy was so good. And then now he's playing a bad guy. Grant Gustin's kind of in the same boat where he's going to, if he does want to play a bad guy, he's got to make that transition, and might not necessarily be an easy one.
And you can almost already say that he's kind of gone bad because he did something very selfish. You know, I mean, he broke the timeline because he wanted his mommy back. And, you know, we've been talking about how selfish Rip Hunter's been. I mean, good grief, Barry. Like,
I just had a sudden thought. Sorry, I hate to interrupt, but are the Legends of Tomorrow going to come to Flashpoint to fix things that Barry just did, since they're time cops basically in season 2?
Because Rip Hunter is so into doing that.
Well,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't change destiny. Barry somehow did. They're going to have to undo that.
You know, you bring up a good point. Legends of Tomorrow Season 1 started in January. Legends of Tomorrow Season 2 is going to start with everything else. So, yeah, it could be very possible they could do a crossover.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Michelle. It was literally just like, boom, it hit me. And I was like, oh my God, if I don't say it, I'm going to forget. So I apologize.
Yeah, because he doesn't have any hair. So if you don't say it right away,
it all just leaves right out of here.
So
it
Michelle,
evaporates.
Michelle, were you done saying what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move on to the next one, which is Carlos Valdez on Flashpoint, repercussions and relationships. Basically, what the season mostly deals with is the repercussions of that alternate timeline being open, like we were just talking about. A lot of fans are expressing concern over some of their favorite characters and relationships being just gone overnight. And all this work that we've done over the past couple of years is just undone. And what Carlos said was, I can assure you that is not the case. So think about this. For example, I know we've been harping on it because it's a thing with Chris, but say Laurel on Arrow in the alternate universe, she could still be alive. So stuff like that can happen, and Olicity could still be a thing, and on and on and on. You can go into various different things. Oliver could be together with Shadow. So the things have moved on, and what they're saying is, don't worry, things will go back to normal, which they've said all along. But I think at this point in time, right before the season, it bears repeating. So I'm glad that Carlos did that.
It's all part of the media machine, them saying these things. It gets people hyped and excited for the premiere.
Definitely. Hey, speaking of things that Carlos Valdez also mentioned at Dragon Con, he got asked a question about superpowers and what he'd like, and he kind of turned it on its head, and he said that he and Teddy Sears were actually, they took a detour on the way to Dragon Con, and they came across an unconscious cyclist, and their handler happened to be an EMT and got out and helped, and they called 911, and they all did their part. And he said that's really more important than wishing we had superpowers, is actually doing the right thing in the real world. So a really cool story. I encourage you to pop into the show notes and read the article for yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So next one, I'll do this one real quick in the Flash universe. Mirror Master is one of my favorite Flash villains because it was in one of the very first arcs of the Flash I read when I was a kid. Mirror Master is coming to the Flash show, but he's also going to be changed up a little bit. If you're familiar with the comics, he uses a gun basically to use mirrors and walk through them and set his traps. I guess in the Flash TV show, it's going to be his meta power, which I think is also really cool, but still fairly accurate to what the character does.
Cool. Also this week, Kevin Smith had some Flash news, and it was some of the behind-the-scenes filming that he aired on his AMC series Geeking Out. If you have a chance, pop on over to YouTube and take a look, because it's a lot of interviews with Barry and Candace on how they behave in and out of character. It is a great little clip, even if you're not the biggest Kevin Smith fan.
Another clip that we have is a new Time Strikes Back trailer from The Flash. So again, we have it in the show notes. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and take a look at it. It's mostly footage that we have already seen in a recap of last season, but there is a new speech from Reverse Flash in there, and Reverse Flash reveals to Barry the trouble he'll be in if he remains in the Flashpoint timeline too long.
And next we have a couple of articles about Supergirl. In the first one, Tyler Hoechlin comments on his portrayal of Superman, saying that it's going to be more like how he intended to be, just an incredible symbol of hope that to kids, that they can do anything, that they can be good people, and that good people can triumph over evil. You don't have to be dark and brooding and always in this state of masculine toughness. And then the next article, Andrew Kreisenberg addresses that Superman, how the show will address how he's more popular in the Supergirl universe. One of the things that they have said that they didn't want to bring Superman in too early to make sure Supergirl had a good season to, establish herself. But in the second season, they're going to make sure that that Superman will not take away or diminish Supergirl.
So Greg Berlanti has announced a new show on Fox called Black Lightning. We'll be talking about this more in the future, but because it's on Fox, we don't have high hopes for it, and we will just see how it goes from there. So we heard that it's going to happen, and we will keep you informed as things progress.
And fans have power because fans made Constantine Blu-ray on Blu-ray and DVD possible. Hashtag bring back Constantine. Everybody go out and buy 5,000 copies of this. So they are forced to bring back Constantine.
But we tried that with Firefly and it didn't work.
Chris, are you ready to sell your car?
Do you know how many copies of Firefly I've bought in my life now?
Neil, are you ready to get that third mortgage on your timeshare?
You know what? I'm just saying that everyone I know is getting Constantine for Christmas.
Sweet.
My grandmother, here you go, Nana. Here's a copy of Constantine.
What? What did you say, Neil? What?
So that means we need to launch the Flaming Hands podcast when the series comes out on DVD and Blu-ray, so then we can continue when it's resurrected. Flaming Hands.
Sounds good to me. So let's move on. There was a couple of Arrow cast and crew interviews. Katie Cassidy was interviewed at Salt Lake City Comic-Con. The article is on bleedingcool.com. And then also Stephen Amell and David Ramsey had a great time talking some John Barrowman, and they let something slip with it. But I will let you read the article over on bleedingcool.com if you want to be spoiled. If you don't want to be spoiled, I'm not going to say anything. My lips are sealed.
That was a good panel. I watched it. It's really funny.
Yeah, Salt Lake City Comic-Con puts the full panels out in pretty well-produced video as well on YouTube, so definitely check it out.
What do we got next, Neil, in the comic news?
Great. So a couple pieces of comic book news this week. We've talked about the direct-to-digital Malcolm Merlin series before. Well, it's finally out as a collected graphic novel. IO9 did a great interview with John Barrowman and his sister. And they actually talk about in the interview that they'd love to do a single Arrow episode that kind of summarizes it or does a Malcolm Merlin focus episode. Whether or not they'll get it, who knows? I personally think it would make a great mid-season miniseries, or maybe even on CWC as animated. The second piece of comic news we had is this week, as SP is showing in our video, that Green Arrow Rebirth #6 came out. It starts a new arc, Sins of the Mother, Part 1. Story by Benjamin Percy, art and color by Stephen Byrne, and letters by Nate Pecchios of Blambot. The cover art was done by W. Scott Forbes, and the variant cover was done by Neil Adams and Josh Adams with Tim Shin. And if you've been following the series, it left Ollie in a bit of a cliffhanger as the first arc wound down, and they don't really deal with it. This is an Emiko-focused episode, and it's also told in two parts with some flashback and some current day. It's worth jumping in. Great place to hang out with. Lots of good Emmy action and shadow. So definitely worth checking out if you're an Arrow fan.
My favorite since the one shot. So it's that good. Say, Chris, if people want to talk, say, Green Arrow comics, DC comics, Marvel comics, anything, they can find all that great content over on the GonnaGeek.com network. So what would you recommend that people check out?
So guys, we have all sorts of content over at GonnaGeek.com. We pride ourselves in having all sorts of awesome geeky shows. I think we're up to either 17 or 18 podcasts now of all sorts of different things, be it TV shows, general nerd culture. But this is one of our coolest podcasts I want to talk about, one of our newer ones. It's from Strange and Unusual. It's kind of a storytelling podcast where it's a story that's unfolding before your ears. Well, Season 2, Episode 9 of Friend of the Family just came out, entitled Sicker, Sadder, Hunter, Wronger. That's right, guys. Friend of the Family is back. In this episode, we learn the fate of Alice Belford, a warrior against the dark, who we last left in dire straits in a pulse-pounding 2-part cliffhanger, and something probably happens to the vampire Asmodeus and her great-uncle Lawrence. So you can go check that out over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. And while you're there, check out one of the other awesome podcasts we have there, too. We've got all sorts of content. Just go watch it. GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
I love Strange and Unusual because it's an audio drama. It's a story being told. It's like an audio book, real life radio play. If you like that sort of stuff, you gotta check that stuff out. We are very lucky to have them. It's very well produced, very well written, and it just keeps you captivated all the way around. Neil, you've listened to it, right?
Yeah, I'm current with that series. I went back and binged it from the beginning. And their feed, if you're listening through iTunes or different feed, has a second radio play as well. So you kind of have to hunt and peck to get Friend of the Family, which is my personal favorite.
Actually, I think there's 3 different stories going on. So just be careful of which one. And so you're not completely thrown off. Be careful if you watch the title. Make sure it's the series that you are watching. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. I want to say thank you to Suncast. I want to say thank you to Steven. I want to say thank you to the guest viewers that we have right now in Fire Talk. Thank you very much for coming over and chatting with us in the chat. I want to thank you who have downloaded the podcast. I'm talking to you. Yeah, you with your iPhone, your Android device, your MP3 player of some sort. Thank you very much for doing that. And thank you very much though I'm pointing at you that are watching us on YouTube. I really appreciate you catching our replays that are posted by our great video editor, Chris. And once again, Chris, thank you very much for doing the video editing because it is awesome.
If you want to join in all the fun live, you can join us Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on geeks.live or over on firetalk.com. And don't forget that after the show, we shut down the recorders and just hang out with our live listeners, where we all kind of share our thoughts on geeky topics, just kind of hang out and chat on whatever catches our fancy.
You can watch the next live show on the Gonna Geek Network over on geeks.live. The next live show on the network is Better Podcasting, Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. We really appreciate those 5-star reviews on iTunes. Like us on Facebook and YouTube, and badger us on Twitter.
Don't forget, you can find all of our contact information over on the Gonna Geek Network. I'm going to remind you guys again, that URL, gonnageeknetwork.com. Find all that info there. While you're there, check out the forums. Check out one of their awesome shows that make up the network. Go watch some live content on geeks.live. Spend time there. Find some cool stuff. If you want to share your thoughts, though, on what we've been talking about on Legends of Tomorrow or upcoming Arrow news, head on over to our Facebook page, send in a tweet, or best of all, give us a call on our voicemail at 612-888-CAVE. That's 612-888-2283.
And one final word in case you didn't catch the announcement at the top of the show. We have Michelle now with us as a full-fledged host of the show going forward. I want to thank her for being such a great guest host throughout the summer. We wouldn't have made it through the summer without you. It was definitely wacky with all of our schedules. So thank you very much for that. So on behalf of all of the quote unquote dude hosts, yes, listener, that was indeed an actual contractual term. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you. I'm really flattered that you guys actually wanted to bring me on full time, and I look forward to talking Arrow with you guys for as long as possible and doing all that stuff.
It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, totally. Well, gang, that just about wraps it up for another week. Any last words before we sign off and open up the Fire Talk interface to our live listeners? At Stargate Pioneer.
Hashtag Timeship Fleet.
At the Chris Farrell.
Hashtag he saw Mark Zuckerberg.
At Michelle Ely.
Hashtag I'm a host now. What?
And I am at Neil Isn't Witty, signing off with, go ahead, break my arm. Oracle, I think we're done here.
This was the Starling Tribune. You can leave us feedback at gonnageek.com or check out our archive at starlingtribune.com. Visit gonnageek.com for more podcasts. Music by Kevin MacLeod can be found at incompetech.com. This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, stories, and situations are the property of Time Warner. No infringement is intended. We will see you for the next episode of CW's Arrow.
Woohoo! Done with the podcast.
Oh, wow.
What's that?
One, I have no idea what's going on with my lungs. And two, you guys froze like 3 times on me.
And Neil froze once.
Neil froze once for me, and SP froze once for me.
Yeah, Michelle, you froze a couple of times, and SP froze once for me. So.
It is the wonder of WebRTC and the FireTalk interface. As long as we stay on here, that's what we're going to get.
Okay. So that was kind of weird. So I'm just going to be quiet and let those guys go.
Probably a good idea until Neil gets an actual PC, if he ever does that, or a computer that he can enable Google Hangouts on Air or something like that.
I think I can with the new YouTube Live function. In fact, I think that's embedded in the player.
Well, Hangouts on Air is a part of YouTube Live now, which is how we'd have to do it. So that might still be broken. It's not going to be under Google Plus, but it's still a Hangouts, the same tool they use.
Yeah, we should try it one of these days and just see if it works.
Worst comes worst, we could always use Skype and then use OBS to put that into an overlay and stuff and broadcast that way to YouTube Live.
Chris, this is your video broadcast.
Well, I've done similar things with ATGN using Google Hangouts on Air, literally grabbing that video and then putting it into what I want to put out on YouTube Live. So there's other alternatives if we want to explore not using FireTalk. The trade-off is FireTalk has a much quicker response time for us to interact with the chat room. That's the benefit still. Yeah. You're going to have a 30 to 45 second lag on YouTube Live.
We flipped over to YouTube Live / Google Hangouts on Air last night on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. It is a much, much, much more stable interface, but you have that 30-second lag, and it is from whoever's running the video, it is really, really difficult in terms of exponential levels above FireTalk to do. For the co-host, no big deal. You just come in like you normally would.
You just have to get your system worked out for how you want to do it, because that was the first 3 episodes we did ATGN using OBS and stuff. I was scrambling to do stuff, and now I've kind of got hotkeys figured out, and I occasionally still forget to turn on like the news of the week lettering and stuff, and it is what it is. But once you get the hang of it, it's not bad. You just have to figure out how to set it up right. So,
and Chris and I are entwined in the podcast about podcasting circles, and we have our ears to the ground on different things that we can use. And because neither of us have a Skyposaurus, this is the sort of stuff that we're forced to deal with. So,
unless they want to put us on Diamond Club.
If you want to submit,
no,
go
I don't
ahead,
think
Chris.
we have the same reach that the Gunny Geek does. Why they would want that on there? So.
No, we don't have the reach, but I don't. Do they? Is Aero Squad on Diamond Club? I thought they were.
I don't think they are.
Okay. Well, there you go.
We could ask Dan. I don't know if he's looking for other stuff right now.
Go, Chris. Go ahead. You can. That would be up to you. You'd have to run it.
Or you could trade Gunny Geek for GFQ.
Something like that. All right, guys. This was an amazing one.
Yes.
Chris, I have to say it was really good.
I don't read much in DC right now, though, aside from Batman and All-Star Batman and Nightwing.
So All-Star Batman, there's only been the one shot on that, right?
That is correct. But it's Scott Snyder and John Romita Jr., so I'm totally on board with that.
Yep.
You know what?
I picked it up.
Yep. You guys aren't reading Superman, not the Action Comics, but the Superman book. Yep. Man, I really loved this issue as well. Aside from Crypto.
How much is it on Comixology?
$2.99, same price.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This Neil and I kind of differ a little bit on this one. I like this, the Justice League, but Neil said it was a little difficult to follow, and I'm liking the story because I think it's the best of the characters in the team ups.
Okay.
So I'm liking that. Michelle, I posted this in our chat. The last page. Oh my gosh, what the heck was that?
I know. It's that Supergirl. It's like if you didn't like her rebirth, this issue, it's like it really sets the tone of what they want to do. Really explore that whole alien in a new culture, going back and forth, because her mission is very new and very raw, and it's because it's so immediate. It's something Superman can't do, because like it actually says in that issue of Supergirl, Superman's had all this time to deal with it, and you haven't. And it was just oh man.
Yeah, I wonder if I have the feeling it's like a British accent or something like that she's talking in, because they do say that she's talking in an accent. So I don't know what a Kryptonian accent would be in English, but I'm picturing British. I don't know why. It is a good book. Up till I mean, even the last page is good, but it's like, oh my gosh, what the heck is that? Because you're all happy and good, and that could be a good thing, but it looks like could be scary. I don't know. So
yeah,
get through this. Supergirl, it's not the one shot, it's issue number 1, and it's amazing. And the other one that I picked up was Nightwing. I haven't had a chance to read it. It's obviously not bagged and boarded. Is anybody else reading Nightwing?
I've only read issue 1.
This ends that first arc, and he debriefs this first mission with Bats at the end. I think it was good. And I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's awesome stuff. So if you haven't yet, go to your local comic book shop or Comixology and pick up some of the Rebirth. It's perfect time to start reading this stuff, because it's like right at the beginning. And what a wonderful thing. There was also in the Independents, the Faster Than Light. Neil, were you able to pick any of that up?
No, I didn't see it at my local shop, but I'll check a bigger comic shop downtown.
So apparently they have their first trade paperback out, or compendium, or whatever you want to call it. And I don't know how many episodes it is, or how many issues that are in. The second one's coming out in November, so I don't think it's all 10. There's 10 out right now. It's amazing. And the big thing with Faster Than Light is there's this app called FTL app, and you actually have to point it at the pages. And what it does is it brings up 3D CGI representations of whatever you're supposed to be focused on, as well as kind of background information on it. So it really is cool. It's the most interactive comic book that I have ever seen. And it's not with any of the big ones. It's not IDW, it's not Image, it's not Marvel, it's not DC. It's a new one called Avatar. Apparently their television rights have been picked up. I still have to get the story, but the television rights have been picked up to do a pilot of some sort, and I don't know for who. So if anybody's listening to this and they know, please let me know so I can go look up the article. And it's amazing stuff.
Right on.
All right.
Great, guys. Well, hey, until next week.
Yep.
One more episode of Legends to do.
That's right. And what are we doing after that? Have we decided yet?
Yeah.
Do you guys want to take a break before the season starts?
Well, how much time do we have?
October, first week in October, isn't it? For Arrow?
October 6th is our first podcast.
All right. So 15th will be done. 6th is the first. Yeah. Let's take a week off. The 22nd. Let's take off. But let's come back and do a preview on the 29th.
Sounds good.
Cool.
Okay.
All right, guys.
All right.
Unless somebody wants to get together, and not all of us do, on the 22nd, do a comic review for that week or whatever. So, we'll leave that possibility open.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Catch you guys later.
All right.
Night, everyone.